Studios don't tend to tie a hit soundtrack to a hit movie like they did decades ago, which is a shame. Even if you don't love Reality Bites, you should really dig on the music. They've got songs like My Sharona, Baby I Love You Way, Spin the Bottle, Spin It Round Again, Bed of Roses, how's that go again? I forget. All I want is you, I'm on a road to nowhere, and stay. Doodle-doodle-doo, stay. Many of which I listen to on a regular basis, as I just proved. So what we're talking about is quality. Simple excellence. Something you want in your life over and over. You know what else is quality? Excellent, and you want in your life over and over? Bev, can you guess? It's Spark Plug Coffee. I don't let you guess, did I? It doesn't matter if you prefer decaf or half calf over normal levels of caffeine, because Spark Plug has no problem with you de or halving it. They offer up all kinds of blends and roasts. They even let you shake yourself out of a rut of drinking the same blend all the time by providing rotating seasonal blends. But hey, I didn't even tell you that Sparkplug only puts the freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans in Canada in that bag. You'll receive your orders within a week, but you have to live in Canada or the US to be part of this. Canadians even get free shipping, so live with us up here and then look at the savings. Speaking of keeping buckaroos in your pocket, being a member of the Autopilot Coffee Club saves you money every time you order. Look at those perks. Look at those deals. You can customize your membership to only get shipments when you're prepared for a new batch. Deliveries won't show up like clockwork, and then you're thinking, I won't get to the new stuff for a while, and I want it fresh. But since you can pause or cancel any time, calling this a Coffee of the Month Club would be one big lie. So try the website, sparkplug.coffee/HYES. You will save 20% when you use our HYES promo code. That's one time only, but 20% off a nice big shipment would be a pretty big deal. Well, all I want is podcast. Ding, 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 ding. So let's get to the meat of it. Bev, cue the music man.
And action. Have you ever seen
Reality Bites? Hey there, people who like podcasts, and thank you for listening to us as we bring you the 594th episode of Have You Ever Seen? We look back at classic movies on this channel, or at least movies that came out some time ago. The word classic doesn't always apply. And we spoil those old movies. I'm the short-haired couch hopper who likes to eat his candy bars with the wrapper on, but doesn't like getting fired for eating that bar, Ryan Ellis. Actually, he didn't really care, did he? And here's a master at the art of time suckage, and someone who loves this movie in spite of some of its very dated dialogue, my wife, Bev.
That's me.
So welcome to Joy Month. It's June. It's joy. We'll be covering 4 films this month, and they all bring us a lot of good feelings. Maybe not this one so much. Anyway, the coming attractions opinion question for Reality Bites. Okay, I didn't hate it, but didn't love it. Ben Stiller has directed 6 movies in his career. Reality Bites was his debut, then it was The Cable Guy, Zoolander, Tropic Thunder, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, so a big gap there, and Zoolander 2. You can make a case for probably 3 of those being his best, or maybe the better way to put it is any of those 3 are your favorite of his movies. So put them in order from 1 to 6, your favorite to your least favorite, and let's see if we match up our order, or at least come close.
Well, number 1 is pretty predictable for both of us because Tropic Thunder is one of the best comedies made this century.
Or ever.
Maybe ever. Number 2 is harder for me. Reality Bites, probably because of my personal affinity for the movie. Number 3, Cable Guy. Number 4, Zoolander, because to be honest, I've never really gotten the Zoolander thing. Oh, I didn't hate it ever, but I was never quite understood the broad appeal of that movie. Anyway, never saw Zoolander 2, and I never saw Secret Life of Walter Mitty, so I have to give a big ol' NA to those 2. In my mind, Zoolander is his worst film then.
It's funny because our order is pretty similar. Not exactly the same.
I do have to give a real shout out. If I could include his TV work, Tropic Thunder, and then Severance, and then Escape at Dannemora, and then Reality Bites, those 2 would be right under Tropic Thunder. They're such works of art.
Tropic Thunder is awesome. We love it. It's so funny. But as far as pure art, those 2 are extraordinary. For me, it goes Tropic Thunder, The Cable Guy, Reality Bites, Zoolander, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and Zoolander 2. And I have seen all 6 of those, by the way. Tropic Thunder, best thing he's ever done, I think, on the big screen. Maybe not the small screen because of those 2 shows, but It's close, let's put it that way. I love that movie so very much. He's a writer, he's a director, he's a producer, and he's the star of that film. And it's so funny. We saw it again on my birthday, and we still laughed, blackface or not. But I agree with those who think The Cable Guy was ahead of its time and has aged pretty well. I never got the whole Zoolander thing, although there are 2 or 3 good laughs in that first one. When David Duchovny explains something, and then because Stiller forgot the next line, he says, "But what's about the whatever? I just told you." Because that's Duchovny going off script saying, "I just told you, Ben." That's funny. And then the whole thing about the small model. Where will all the people go? Okay, there's some funny moments in Zoolander, but I overall didn't really get it and like it like a lot of people did. It's a bit of the Anchorman thing. I like that one more, but it's not that fun.
Yeah, same. I went and rewatched Anchorman because I thought I must have been missing something. I mean, I liked it, but man, people love it. Maybe in the case of both these movies is we were just not teenagers when they came out.
I saw Walter Mitty many years ago, didn't connect with it, don't remember anything about it, and of course that's a pretty famous story that's been adapted before. And I'm middle of the road on Reality Bites. I don't love it, don't hate it. That's why I put it third. There are some good things in it, for sure.
You'll be the voice of reason today, because I will not be.
So The Kids Aren't All Right was released by Universal Pictures a little over 30 years ago on February 18th, 1994. So I guess I was 20 and 4 days old. The film had a budget of about $11 million, yet despite that fairly low cost to make the flick, it wasn't really a success domestically, although it did triple that modest budget worldwide, so overall, human beings watch Reality Bites in pretty decent numbers. It's a similar story to what we said about Edge of Tomorrow last week. It wasn't a big hit domestically, but money is money, and it did rake in enough of the greenbacks worldwide to justify its, well, I guess not greenbacks from the worldwide, are they? But enough of the money worldwide to justify its cost. But Bev, the movie is 3 decades old, so please remind us what it's about and get all up on their faces by giving everybody the Winona Ryder skinny on Reality Bites. And I said it that way because she is so skinny in this movie, although very lovely.
Somebody in a review I read described her as like a smoking elf or something, or...
Eat a salad, Winona. Eat a salad, Winona. Eat a salad, Winona. Da, 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 da.
Lady...
No, sorry, eat a burger, Winona.
I know, I wasn't sure where you were meaning.
Stop
there.
losing weight, gain some. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
All right. Lainey, Troy, Vicky, and Sammy are friends and recent college grads in 1994. They're living on their own, trying to find love, purpose, money, and trying to really make something of themselves by the age of 23. The balance of their friendships gets strained when Lainey meets and falls for Michael, a yuppie TV producer who forces Troy and Lainey to decide whether their love-hate relationship is love or hate. When Michael inadvertently gets his network to butcher the documentary Lainey is working on, it drives her into Troy's arms. They sleep together. He bails. Lainey dumps Michael, gets her act together. Troy's father dies. He gets over himself. Troy and Lainey reunite dramatically, accompanied by U2.
Which is a great song.
It is a great song.
Well used in this movie. Or, in a nutshell, mildly interesting nobodies get to be the subject of a hip TV show. Because at the end, Elena and Roy are the 2 characters. Is this woman that talented that she should be that upset? You're tearing it all up! Get it made! You're not that good to begin with.
Well, I'll say I have so many thoughts about the sellout cut of her film. First of all, the film Reality Bites makes a huge mistake. They never show us what her vision actually is. What is she trying to create with this footage? Was Michael really supposed to know that she didn't want to make something lighthearted and marketable? Because she even says to him, I didn't know what it was yet. Well, then how do we know that this was wrong? I need to see what was lost when they did that. But I also have to confess, I worked at a place like In Your Face for 9 years as an editor. And here I am admitting that if you had handed me that footage, I would have cut something exactly like that. And I would have been so proud of it. Yeah. For real.
Because you know the audience.
That's the audience for that show. If you're going to give your footage to in-your-face television, that's exactly what they're going to do with it. And this came out after The Real World was a phenomenon on MTV. Right. So you can't be surprised. It was still gaining momentum. Reality TV certainly hadn't taken over the way that it did,
but it did exist
in the 2000s. But it absolutely existed, and it was a phenomenon. That plus Cops are credited with inventing the genre in a way, but it was a phenomenon. Here in Canada, we never got it. I've never seen one episode of The Real World because we had no access to it here in Canada.
We've seen Cops, though.
Oh, yeah, we could watch Cops.
Those wife-beater guys banging their heads against the side of the cop car are far more interesting than anybody in this movie. At least what's been filmed, not the characters we see for an hour 40. No, but what we see in her movie, they're fine. They're not worth being in a television show or in a film.
I saw this interview with Ethan Hawke talking about how in the 90s he was like, when I first read the script, I thought, who wants to see a movie about these know-nothing middle-class white kids in Texas? Why is anybody going to be interested in this? And he said that he thought about it. His conclusion that he drew was, because everybody's interesting.
No, they're not. I don't think I am.
Oh, well, I disagree as a person who chose to marry you and live with you and make a podcast with you. And
mildly interesting.
I like to think that our listeners would disagree, but the point is that you can make anybody interesting. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a plight. Everybody has stakes in their lives. So it's not like there's not a story there, but maybe it takes an in-your-face editor with a pizza montage. To make it interesting. And if at 23 years old you're upset that you could be getting a payday, making a living, making television, you have
get your foot in
life.
The door.
Yeah, like get some practice, learn what you're doing. And how could you expect this movie that you're making as a recent college grad to be your big opus?
When you live in Houston, too.
Yeah, but this is from the perspective of 2024. We have to put ourselves in the mind of the 90s, of Generation X, because this is the most quintessential 90s Gen X movie. And in 1994, there was simply nothing worse you could be than a sellout. The word poser was the worst insult you could call somebody back then. I totally remember that. There was just nothing more valuable than your integrity and your artistic purity. It was so legitimately massive back then. Because we were young people back then, so we can attest. If you were in your 30s, you probably wouldn't get it if you were not born yet or not a teenager yet.
Well, we were younger than these characters are. I was 20 and you were 16.
16, yeah. Part of the reason I think why I made such a massive
It's our generation. Mm-hmm. I was never a big fan of the Troy character, even though I think Ethan Hawke does a good job playing the Troy character.
I think part of why I like the Troy character is because he's hot, and then I was 16.
When you were 16, you liked Ethan Hawke's Van Dyke.
I sure did. I really, really did.
Let's talk about some numbers. This won't take long. Rotten Tomatoes, just 62% of critics like this film, so I called it Joy Month. But this week and then next week, we're going to find out we're not well liked by critics, but you think this is wrong, and I think next week was very wrong, that they don't like the movies at least a little bit. Anyway, 62% isn't terrible, but it barely gets a fresh tomato. There are 60 reviews on the site, and the average is 6.1 out of 10, so all of those things track. 6.1, 62%. Sometimes you'll see, anyway, it doesn't matter. 74% of audiences like the film, so it's a little bit better with them. And by the way, Ben Stiller, when you talk about his acting career and his directing career in total, all of it, he has many splats. So many films that got torched. I didn't write anything down, but I just know he had a lot of splats. And I bring it up because we've talked about some people lately where they have, what was it, Cruise and Blunt last week on Edge of Tomorrow both have, I think it was 8 or 9 movies at 90+% on Rotten Tomatoes. But Stiller, if he has that many, he's got a lot of movies that didn't even get a passing grade. This was 63rd at the 1994 U.S. box office. Forrest Gump was number 1, The Lion King was number 2, Speed was number 8, and Pulp Fiction was number 10, and we covered all of those. Gump and Pulp made the AFI's Top 100 list. And this was nominated for the AFI's Top 100 Passions. I mean, I love the love story, but the love triangle is pretty good at least, so I guess that was fairly worthy, but that's all I have for credentials. So you love the movie, you wanted to do it back in January for the month of Bev, but we pushed it back till now. Give us your, well, not really opening thoughts anymore, but your thoughts about Reality Bites. And how do you feel about it now when you're 46? So you're literally twice as old as, I think, everybody here. They're about 23, give or take.
Yeah, I'm literally twice their age now. I mean, it definitely hits different, I'm not going to lie. It's impossible for me to be impartial about this film because when it came out, I was 16. I think it was like 51% responsible for shaping my impression of what's cool for the remainder of the 90s.
This is Heather's?
Winona Ryder, she has more space in my head than I think I realized. I also really loved Beetlejuice when I was a little bit younger, and I just loved her. I really wanted to be Vicky, actually. Janeane Garofalo, I discovered her in this movie. I'd never seen her in anything before, but she's so cool in this movie, and she's so funny, and everything I actually want to be, always. But, of course, I wanted to look like Winona Ryder. I wanted to have Vicky's personality.
I do too.
Don't we all? She's so pretty, and she's so likable. Appealing. Yeah. Those big doe eyes. How can you not love her? She was just there for so much of that impressionable time in my life. But anyway, I was a little afraid to revisit it, because there are definitely some things that stand out as a little cringy now. But I cringe when I think about what I was like when I was 23. And I actually appreciate that there's a fair warts and all impression of what 23-year-olds are like. So I'm here to defend it. And you, sir?
Well, I didn't hate it. I think the actors are quite committed. I just said it. Ethan Hawke, I don't believe in his character, and there's a part of me that wants to hit him. Not hit him, I guess, but
He deserves to be in it.
I didn't buy into him when I saw this movie. Probably the mid-'90s. I didn't see it in the theater, and I probably didn't see it till the 96, 97 time frame, somewhere in there. So I didn't like him very much, and I didn't believe in him very much, and yet at the same point, I think he does a good job playing the character that they wrote. And Winona was at her peak around this time frame for a good long time, too. There are a lot of people in the late 80s, early 90s, you could say, Tom Cruise, of course, Tom Hanks. Well, not so much Hanks, actually, because he had that lull. But a lot of people that were big then. But the guy I pictured was Kevin Costner, who has nothing in common with her, but every year it seemed like he was making a hit, an acclaimed film, or both. Put Winona in that category, maybe too, because of Beetlejuice, you just said that. Heathers, which is a movie that you loved and a lot of people did too. We covered Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, yeah.
Mermaids was the same year as that. 92's Dracula, that's right, which is a movie that maybe we'll cover one of these days. The same year as this, one of my favorite characters ever, and I still think the best version of Jo March, and there have been some good ones that have done this, but is her in Little Women. She's wonderful in that. She was nominated for that. I think she probably should have won the Oscar for playing Jo March that same year as when she did this character in Reality Bites. You mentioned Garofalo. You know the biggest problem with this film, actually? It's not that Hawks is bad. I just find his character insufferable. Blaming the writing.
Her character's insufferable.
And then we didn't know this at the time in 94, but Steve Zahn is such a talented guy.
So wasted.
Is so wasted. And Ben Stiller's fine as Michael. I wouldn't really criticize him. But the guys are meh at best. But the women are very good. Winona's fine, if not really good. Well, she's very good, actually, in this, as she always was at this time frame. It's too bad her career plummeted a little bit for various reasons. And Garofalo, who got fired during pre-production, even though she was friends with Ben Stiller before this movie. But then she got rehired because I guess Winona spoke up for her and said, she's really good, Ben, bring her back. And Winona, I think, had in her contract that Ethan Hawke would play Troy. That's
Really?
how much she wanted him to play opposite her in this
Did
film.
they ever act together again?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Helen Childress wrote this movie, her only screenplay ever. And she was a kid when she wrote it. They worked on it for many years. She and
was
Stiller
20.
did.
She wrote it between the ages of 20 and 23.
So what's been criticized for 100 years, 1,000 years by people, men write men and then they don't know how to write women. You're probably right about that in saying it. But in this case, the woman wrote the women well and did not write the men well.
Yeah, in the case of Troy, I can officially stop rolling my eyes at all those girls who were in love with Edward Cullen, even though he was a walking red flag. Because I have to admit...
Twilight is what we're saying.
Yeah, Edward Cullen from Twilight, where if you were not of the age that was appropriate to enjoy Twilight, you would be like, what is the appeal of this man? But that was totally me with the character of Troy. And I think Ethan Hawke plays him like a guy who's lashing out because he's hurting. You know, it's possible for me to believe at the end of the movie when he's really gone through something, he has the potential to grow and be a good man. He's mean as a defense mechanism. Of course, he has even more potential to just ride out this act into adulthood and become unemployed, insufferable blowhard.
Yeah.
But you can see that there's somebody lovable and vulnerable underneath all of his insults. All of his jokes, by the way, or too many of them, are just him parroting corporate slogans, but with sarcasm. Like, she's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. He just has no jokes except, isn't capitalism stupid? So yeah, he is insufferable.
Proving that marketing works if it got in your brain, even if you don't like it.
It's true, which I guess is part of the message too, that Gen X is the generation that grew up watching television and really being aggressively advertised to. I can't be the first person to point this out, but Lainey is the villain of the movie. If the movie has a villain, she's selfish, she's irresponsible, she's a bad friend, she cheats on Michael, she steals from her parents a lot.
Yeah. She deserves to get fired.
Well, she knows she's going to get fired. She doesn't deserve to get fired. She only pulls that prank because she knows she's going to get fired because he doesn't like her face.
That's why she deserves to get fired. At that
well,
point.
Ultimately, she deserves to get fired for pulling that BS, but she didn't really deserve to get fired. But again, it's like, well, you're nothing. You're like a kid. You're a teenager. You lose a job. You'll get another one. It's hard. You couldn't pay me enough to be 23 again.
When you were this age, wouldn't be so bad, though, because you could have lived in this nice place. Although a big part of that is Vicky, because she has a good job at the Gap.
That Lainey is too good for. Another way that Lainey is awful. But I don't hate her or Troy. I think Lainey's characters like the Carrie Bradshaw or the Hannah Horvath. If you think the creator doesn't realize this character is flawed, then you need to get a grip. yes, they're immature and they're making mistakes. Then they grow up over the course of the film. It's their character arc. And Winona Ryder, we're paying her all these compliments, really giving her her flowers today. But when you've seen so many of her films, you see that she does have range. She plays Lainey like a real grown-up child. There's a real physicality in her performance because she's all gangly, she's all elbows and knees, and looks like a kid. She has this clumsy...
She doesn't look that adult now.
No, it's true, but I think more so than her other films. You watch her in Heathers, and she actually does have more poise and grace in that film than she does in this, because it wasn't that long ago that she was a kid, like 5 minutes ago. She was actually a child, a student, and she's still just practicing at being an adult.
I gave her a resume a few minutes ago. I forgot about the Oscar nomination from the year before this, because Little Women was an Oscar nomination in 1994 for Best Actress, but the year before, Best Supporting Actress for The Age of Innocence.
Yeah, and she was working with Scorsese and Coppola.
But one of the reasons she wanted to do this movie was she was tired of the corsets and the period films, and she wanted to just be herself, which is a girl who dresses in T-shirts and jeans.
These loose baby doll dresses.
Yeah, and then be gangly, which she couldn't be in Age of Innocence. And Dracula, she gets to be a bit of a screw-up in a way that she wasn't allowed to be for a long time. There she had to be the prim and proper character. Working with great directors and good roles, and even though I don't love the movie, this is probably a better role in some ways than those were. Certainly more suited to what she was at this time frame, and this was her peak. By the way, the title doesn't actually mean reality does bite. It refers to sound bites of reality, because that phrase was becoming big. Sound bites.
Bites of reality, not reality does bite.
Right. And that's what he calls the movie at the end, right? Michael's Reality Bites is the movie they see at the end. The TV show, I should say. You
know what the working title was? It was Baby Busters.
Ugh.
Baby instead of Baby Boomers, because it's the first big Gen X film.
Oh, okay.
Not the first. I think, when did Singles come out? It came out before this.
2 years before this.
Yeah.
Were we called Gen X in 1994?
Yes, definitely.
Were we? Okay.
It was a Billy Idol song that coined it, and then that Douglas Copeland book, Gen X, came out in like 91, I want to say.
No, then we were, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. And she's a valedictorian of the college. Her big line reminds me of Say Anything. Maybe we should cover that one of these days. This year's 35 years old. Might be a good choice to cover it this year. Anyway, at the end of that, the Diane character, Ione Skye, says, "I've seen the future. Go back." She's a valedictorian. In this, it's Lainey, who's the valedictorian, who says, I forget how it leads up, but then, "I don't know." In both cases, these are people who are admitting, I don't know what's going to happen, and there's all these other issues and all these problems, versus so many valedictory addresses that you probably saw and I've seen, where these people talk about, yeah, we're all going to go out and make our mark. And of course you're going to say that when you're 20 years old or 20 plus years old, whatever you are. Even from high school, you say that kind of stuff when you're, I guess, 18. But it's nice to see two characters in the span of 5 years, both girls, young women, who say things like, I don't know, and go back. Because that's more honest. She doesn't know. And that's one reason why I don't dislike her character, I think, at all, even though you're right. She's extremely flawed, maybe more flawed than the other characters, because she steals from her dad with that gas card, which he finally calls her on at the end of the film. And she cheats on Michael, like you said. They're supposed to be together, and yet she sleeps with Troy. That's a good scene, though, by the way. I love when there's that tight close-up. Spike Lee did that in Do the Right Thing. They weren't making love, but they had that tight close-up with Spike and Rosie Perez, right, where their lips are the only thing you really see on screen. I love when movies can get that intimate without it being hardcore or even softcore, pornographic type stuff. Lainey liked Troy and was into Troy, but Troy was really into Lainey, and he finally gets what he wants, but then he runs away. So their relationship does work. I'm probably going to be inconsistent for the rest of the podcast in saying that I liked and didn't like things about his character and the relationship, but there's elements of that that really do work. So she cheats on Michael, who's probably the right guy for her.
I don't know if he's right for her. I think he's a good guy.
More right for her than Troy is.
Well, he's more, yes, okay. Everybody's more right for anybody than Troy is. But I don't think they belong together. I actually really love the way that Michael is written in this film. I'm glad he never has an asshole turn. He never reveals himself to be a jerk or a cheater. He's not ashamed.
He didn't know that they were going to re-edit her show, her movie, whatever.
No, he didn't know. As a matter of fact, she's fully overreacting because it's not like it's written in stone. They don't have to air it.
It's a rough cut.
It's a rough cut. Exactly. He's like, well, we're just trying something, and she has this big flip out. She's being totally unreasonable, and he really loves her. Troy bullies him, and he reacts and stands up for himself. He's not as cool. He's not as quick-witted as Troy, so he gets embarrassed by him. He takes the bait, but that's just like a really human flaw. He's also in his 20s. He hasn't totally grown up either, but he's leagues ahead of these idiots. He's a little older than them too, but he is also young and just doesn't know how to react to Troy, who's being so crazy mean to him.
I like Michael, especially at 50 years old.
He does not deserve to get his heart broken. I mean, I never hated him, but I think that's good writing, because if you just made him a mustache-twisting villain, then it would be more boring. They struggled to find his character. Childress, the writer, said that she really didn't know what to do with him until Ben Stiller came onto the project, decided to play him himself, and just brought his own ideas to him.
Yeah, he wasn't going to play him at first, but then he thought, I could probably play this character. And he wasn't known as a director. It's funny, you'd think he'd be the actor first and director second, but he was director first and actor second. And he's third bill, too. The poster shows Winona, Ethan, and then him. And if you think about it now, after all these years, Winona and Ethan are still certainly names, but Ben Stiller is the biggest name of the three of them.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I like about these four characters as a potential, I don't think it really plays this out very well because they waste on, and then we don't see that much of the four of them on screen together. There's a fair amount, but maybe there could have been even more. Maybe another 5 to 10 minutes of the movie would have been fine. But it's like four of the Breakfast Club stayed friends. Lainey, I guess, would be the Molly Ringwald character, I guess, right?
Well, Vicky would definitely be Ali Sheedy.
Okay, right. But they basically stayed friends into college. And yet it feels like there's missed opportunities for that friendship stuff. So she wants to film her friends, and this is my show. We keep on saying movie, but it's more of a show. Whatever, movie show. But I didn't see evidence of what they do with each other when they're not filming, when she's not filming, or when they do, that would ever have been a worthy movie.
Yeah, there's not...
For you, yes. You four friends and your friends, you'd love it. But for the rest of us to watch...
They're not nearly as funny as they think they are. A list of things that are cringe watching this movie now, all these years later. I already mentioned Troy's bad jokes. I'd like to buy the world a Coke. Oh, God, please stop recording. Don't let anybody see that. The big gulp thing, what is that? Is that flirting? It's so
She's not
awkward.
drinking, unless it's diet, even then, she's not drinking pop with that body.
And everything they say on camera... They're trying so hard to be profound that it physically hurts me to watch. But I think it's accurate that that's how people that age probably act and talk. And maybe this is because Childress wrote it when she was in her very early 20s.
Helen Childress, yes.
Yeah. Took so many elements from her own life. And she owns up now to the cringe and admits that she could never have written this film in her 30s. I cringe because I'm like, oh, I probably sounded like that too. But everything they say on camera is embarrassing. And I agree with you. They don't illustrate the chemistry of the four of them together as friends. Right from the jump, the first time you see Lainey and Troy together, she's annoyed with him. They're picking fights. He moves in. She's immediately mad that he's there. And yet every time she talks about him, she describes him as her best friend. I'm like, but you hate him. Yeah. Vicky's obviously your best friend. She should be mad at you every time you describe him as your best friend. Yeah. But... It's a lot of tell and not show when it came to
I believe
their
that the four of them like each other a lot, even love each other, but they don't really prove it in the film.
Yeah, we just don't see it enough. And before we move on from talking about Sammy, because there's just so little to say about him, because everyone else gets their showcase and has so much personality, and you have Steve Zahn, who...
We didn't know then.
No, but after this, you see that he's so funny. He has so much charm. He steals every scene in movies where he's playing against George Clooney. And he's in this movie. And yes! And they dress him like an English teacher. The only thing that he gets to do at all is come out to his mother off screen.
So he's a gay character in an early 90s movie, doesn't have AIDS, didn't die, it isn't a tragedy, he wasn't beaten to death for being gay. And then, yes, he comes out to his family and talks about it on camera. That was fairly revolutionary at the time.
Which is wild, yeah.
And I always remember that because this movie didn't stick in my mind all that much. Eating the candy bar with the wrapper on stuck out to me. The songs, of course, did. This is an incredible soundtrack. One of the best I've ever heard, I think, really. And then Ryder and Garofalo, I think, are quite good. But Zahn's moment on camera where he talks about coming out to his parents, I don't remember seeing anything like that before in 1994 in a mainstream movie. Maybe I had, but I can't think of one. Unless it was a movie all about how I'm gay and I'm tragically tortured and they killed me or I died of AIDS. No, this guy comes up to his parents. It doesn't go that well. But then we never hear about it again. There's a part of me that wishes that could have been or should have been more of a focus for him in this movie. Maybe another 5 minutes of his character at least to get to the bottom of that. But also, I applaud that it wasn't the end of the world either.
Yeah, that's a great point, because AIDS looms so
Vicky's arc.
large in this movie.
Gotta get checked for AIDS.
Yeah, it seemed normal in the 90s because it really did loom large in our lives. In 1994, AIDS was a really big deal. But you're right, it becomes Vicky's arc. She's the one that sleeps around, so she's the one that starts to worry. I'm a straight woman, and I worried about getting AIDS, even though I wasn't that promiscuous in the 90s. I was only 16. But it preyed on my mind a lot. So, yes, we have a gay character who doesn't worry about AIDS because he is abstinent. Yeah, celibate, abstinent. Well, I think he describes himself as celibate. It's fully a choice for him because he's afraid if he falls in love, then he would be forced to come out to his family, his conservative family, and he's so afraid of what that would mean for him. Now,
did they say, by the way,
I don't believe
do
that
they
that
live
could
in
be true.
Houston?
Yes.
Ethan Hawke's character is not from Houston. So if he's from there, he's in a place where, and it is a city, and we've learned in recent years, the cities and countries are really what it comes down to. Even if you live in Nebraska, Omaha is different than the countryside of Omaha.
Yes.
Just like New York State is different if you're in Manhattan versus Amherst. So I guess that's the thing, too. If he's actually from Texas, unlike the others, I think, anyway, they're not really from Texas per se.
Right, because if his family is there, then yeah, they're from there too.
There you go, right. So he's got to deal with that whole cliche of,
I guess Lainey's
"They're gonna hate
parents
me."
are also there, so they go over dinners.
Oh, right.
Yeah. This was actually progressive for back then, and it's so easy to forget what the world was like before Queer Eye for the Straight Guy and Queer as Folk came out. Those two shows were absolute game changers. And
or even Will and Grace.
But even Will and Grace, how many seasons were they in before they even allowed a gay kiss?
So Zahn got shortchanged. And he is a supporting character, as is Garofalo. She doesn't have a lot to do in this movie, but she hits when she does make points. I guess she was being a bit of a pain in the ass in rehearsals, and that's why Stiller fired her. But in the movie, she's a pain in the ass kind of character. She's that type of person in reality. She's playing herself in this movie in a lot of ways, and I guess she really clicked with Winona when they made it. And she's the one who's really backing up Sammy. I think they're more close than the others are. The four of them are friends, but it's more like there's the two girls are supposed to be roommates and close friends, but it almost is more Lainey and Troy, and then Sammy and Vicky. There's the whole stretch, by the way, early in the film when Lainey gets the BMW after the dinner with the folks. So it's Joe Don Baker and Swoozie Kurtz. That's her parents, but they're remarried, and that's a whole testy thing. And then we see, I think it's right after that, because my notes here have Ethan Hawke sleeps with Renee Zellweger, who wasn't yet known. And
doesn't
she's
even get a line.
Fairly prominent in the credits, and yet she doesn't even have any more than 5 seconds on screen because he's kissing her after clearly a one-night stand, or maybe it's more than one night. But
No, he throws her phone number away. We watch him.
that's right. Okay, yeah, so there you go, one-night stand then. And then we see the infamous scene where he works at the newsstand and bites the wrapper off the Snickers bar because I can't be bothered to unwrap the Snickers bar. And then they saw that, I guess, on the cameras, and they fire him for that reason. I always remember that because it's both cool. I get why people would think, especially in 1994 or even now, man, that's so badass, versus it's also pretty stupid. What's that line in Spinal Tap? We're going to cover that movie pretty soon. Such a fine line between clever and stupid, or stupid and clever, however they word that. And that's a great example of that scene. It's a famous moment, but at the same point, I think, you're just trying to be cool for someone who's not even watching you, because the character is not being watched. He doesn't know that.
I guess he knows there's a camera. He doesn't care if he gets fired, though.
He almost wants to be, yeah. That's part of what's insufferable about him. John Mahoney, I mentioned Say Anything. He's the dad in that. And here he's got a fairly big role, for a while at least, as the talk show host, the cheesy morning show where he has to put on that he's big and he's up and he's all these things. Lainey works for that show, doesn't want to do that. She forgets his coffee. She keeps on screwing up. I guess you could say she's bound for better things. Fine, but do the job you have. I know I'm 50, but this is part of what I find frustrating about this film, too, is that Winona plays the scenes well, but you almost want to just pull her aside and say, I know he's irritating, and he's a dick, and modern Twitter would roast him alive for all the things he does wrong, and they'd be right to do it. But this is also the job. If you don't want to do it, then either quit or be professional and just do the job.
Well, she's professional. She does the job.
Until she...
And yeah, but she only sabotages because she overhears him say he wants her fired. He says something like, I don't want to look at her rat face anymore. I'm like, sir, nobody believes that you think she's unattractive. He hates her just because he hates her. She's doing her best.
No, she's not.
Well, she's brand new. She's figuring it out.
Yeah, okay. I guess one of the famous scenes in the film, too, and I forgot this is when they do it, but My Sharona, they're all singing, the four of them together. Well, maybe not so much Troy, but the other three are bopping along to My Sharona at the gas station, which is one of the scenes where we see her stealing from her dad with the gas card that he gave her, which
I
was
think
for
it's the
gas.
first time she does that.
Because they have no food and they're all buying junk food and a lot of it. That was going to be in Pulp Fiction, or could have been in Pulp Fiction, for the rape scene. And I guess one of the members of the band found God and said, I don't want that in a scene with rape. Okay, I understand that. So instead of some Reality Bites, and then he went with, what's it called, Miserlou?
No, Miserlou is the beginning of the film, but it's another song by that same band, whose name I can't remember right now.
So My Sharona was supposed to be a great rape song, according to Tarantino, but it is in this movie, and it's fun. But somewhere in there, Lainey has thrown her cigarette from her BMW, from her
Another
dad,
terrible thing she does,
into Michael's car, and that's how they meet. She breaks his Dr. Zaius doll, which it's not a big deal, but it clearly meant a lot to him. That's why it's so hard for me to forgive her entirely, too, even though she's so well played by a really good actress, because she's pretty insufferable as well. They date for a while, and they click, and Troy sees them kiss, and he gives her grief for it. If he was being really honest, although he does say, I am really in love with you, and she laughs it off, go to hell. But clearly...
No, he laughs it off.
Is it he
says, I'm in love with you, and then she starts to soften, and then as soon as she does, he laughs in her face and says, don't flatter yourself or something.
But he actually is in love with her.
Well, yeah,
as much as, or more than, she's in love with him. They also had a thing before, right, in college?
They talk about how they were drunk and they hooked up a little bit. It was a false start. When they sleep together in the movie, that's the first time they've slept together.
And we did say already, that is a very good scene. Well shot by Stiller, intimate, and you could feel the passion. This movie is a passion nominee. For that scene alone, it would be worthwhile. But one of the big things in the film when it comes to comedy, because the movie does have some laughs, it's not the most funny movie of all time, but we see the montage trying to get jobs elsewhere. David Spade plays the wiener dude manager. He's pretty good in his small role. We see the scene also, she's not trying to get a job with this, but with Jean Triplehorn, who was coming off of Basic Instinct not that long before, I guess a couple years before. She was doing a favor for Stiller. I think they were friends or something.
They were dating.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. And she plays this cool MTV-esque, because that's what's it called again, the station he works for?
In Your Face.
In Your Face, right.
They said it's actually MTV, but edgier.
Andy Dick we see in this, Keith David. Ben Stiller's own mom, Ann Mira, plays the one who wants her to define irony, and she can't do that. Amy Stiller, Ben's sister, plays the psychic that's just a voice-only role for Amy Stiller. Part of the montage is that even her dad refuses to hire her, and that's soon after we find she's using that gas card to just get dollars at gas station. I'll pay for your gas, but you give me the money, so I get to keep the money that way.
That relationship, that tough love situation with her parents, who give her a BMW and then refuse to help her out. I mean, that's something that hits so different now because young people have such a way different situation, and I think that parents of young people react very differently to their kids' struggles, as they should.
They're not going to get
2024.
No Beamer.
They're not moving out either. They're not being expected to go make your own way at 23. You can't expect young people to be able to support themselves at that age.
One of the lines that doesn't really hold up so well, though, wasn't that good then, is that Troy's on the inside track to Loserville, USA.
Oh.
Is that Lainey's line?
Yeah, maybe, when she's complaining about him. God, there's so many cringeworthy lines.
Also, what is your glitch?
Oh.
Michael says that to Troy. What is your glitch?
Of course you would say that as a TV producer. A glitch is a TV term.
Oh, yeah, okay. One of the songs on the soundtrack that is fine, but I didn't mention it before, is when Ethan Hawke actually sings I'm Nothing in the club. I guess he has a future maybe as a musician, at least in coffee houses in Houston. Well, go to Austin, I guess you might make a life that way.
And the lyrics to that song are another pretty cringe-worthy. They're just so self-pitying.
But Michael shows up to apologize to Lainey at that moment in the club. And Troy drops the dime and confesses that they slept together, and that's, I guess, really why Michael and Lainey are over with at that point. Yeah, maybe she doesn't belong with him either, but he was the better guy for you.
Oh, he's the better guy.
Why was he in Houston in the first place, by the way? Because I forgot that they're supposed to be in Houston through the whole film. They did shoot it there, and I guess it is actually set there, but he does have New York plates in the scene when she throws the cigarette into his car.
Oh, good question then.
He drove all the way there?
They go to his office. He has an office in Houston, where his Dr. Zaius doll is. Like,
she could have driven there then, yeah.
Well, I guess it's that they have a satellite office in Houston for some reason.
But soon after that, where Troy does bail, well, he already had bailed on Lainey after they had sex together because he can't handle it, but he goes to Chicago because his dad died. And when Lainey finds out, she's about to go to him because she wants to be with her friend and now her lover. Right. Great montage. But as she's about to go out the door, he's standing there in his suit. I love you. I didn't want any confusion. And they kiss, and the movie's basically over. We find out, too, in the very end of the film, that her dad called about the $900 in 1994 money on the gas card. So she should have to pay that money at some point because that's a lot to owe your dad when you're basically stealing on the gas card. We talked about Winona's credits already, but Heathers, Edward Scissorhands, and Little Women, we've covered those three. And also Chris and I talked about her in Lucas on scoring at the movies. That was, I think, her debut in 86. Ethan Hawke, before this, we'd only covered him in before movies. Before Sunrise, Before Midnight, and Before the Devil Knows You're Dead.
That's great.
Now his fourth is Reality Bites. Janine Garofalo, we'd only ever covered in Dogma. I think we said on that podcast that Kevin Smith wishes he'd actually cast her in the main role rather than the bigger star. What's her name again? Linda Fiorentino. Because she would have been better suited for it. She's got a small role in that. But other than that, we've never covered her before. She still works quite a bit, mostly in TV and in voiceover roles. She's a caustic personality, far left liberal.
You know what? She's punk rock. That's what she is.
I'm not, by the way.
She's never compromised herself, and she's always been my hero for that.
And I'm not saying it's bad that she's far left liberal. I'm just pointing it out. Steve Zahn wasn't out of sight. You mentioned the Clooney movie. That was it. Steals that movie in many ways. He's so funny 2 years after this in That Thing You Do. Ben Stiller we've covered in There's Something About Mary and Royal Tenenbaums. That was a long time ago. And then Chris and I covered him in Happy Gilmore and Dodgeball on scoring at the movies. Joe Don Baker, well, we talked about Cape Fear not that long ago. He's in Scorsese's 1991 version of that film. He's had a long career, but he stopped acting in 2012. Swoosie Kurtz, who plays his ex, right? They're the two people that got remarried. She was Volange in Dangerous Liaisons. We covered that last year. And she's also in Slapshot, which Chris and I did last year on scoring at the movies. John Mahoney, we covered him in Moonstruck. And if we do say anything, well, maybe we will. We talked about so much today. He's great as the father in that film. Very flawed character there, too. I love that Renee Zellweger is so prominently credited in this despite 5 seconds of screen time. Jerry Maguire, she's so good in that. Keith David, who was in Something About Mary with Ben Stiller. We talked about Stiller's 6 movies directing, but then the TV shows. Did you say the TV show names? If you didn't, say them now.
I did. It's Severance and Escape at Dannemora.
Right. I guess he directed all of them. Or
Escape at Dannemora, I'm pretty sure he directed every episode.
And most, if not all, of the Severance ones, too.
Amazing television show. I know it was a limited series, so it came and went, and people probably forgot about it, but God, an incredible...
I thought he was the producer on those 2 shows, but yes, a series. But he actually did direct, if not all of them, then certainly most of both of them.
And
both Severance
my
and
God.
Escape at Dannemora. Helen Childress wrote this, her only screenplay ever, so obviously her debut. She's produced films, and she does play waitress. Danny DeVito, Michael Schamberg, and Stacey Shearer were all producers, as they were on Pulp Fiction, I think it was. Well, definitely Aaron Brockovich, because I think all 3 of them, certainly DeVito was nominated for Aaron Brockovich. That's DeVito's only ever Oscar nomination was for producing Aaron Brockovich. But he was involved in Pulp Fiction. I think they all were the same year as this, the movie that could have had My Sharona as well, which was also one of the big zeitgeisty titles. That was a very good year for film. We love Lion King, I Do, Speed, Shawshank, all these other movies. But the zeitgeisty movies in that way were Pulp, and this is certainly arguable, there was in the zeitgeist as well, more in a way than the big hits like Forrest Gump and Lion King, especially with the young people, Pulp and Reality Bites. The movie's 185-1. We had the DVD from the Toronto Public Library, but it didn't work, so we had to pay for it on Prime. And Manuel Lubezki shot this. Yes, that guy. The 3 Oscars guy. 3 in a row. The Children of Men guy. Well, that wasn't one of the Oscars, but he shot that movie. That was a great-looking film. Then he won for, what were they, Gravity and The Revenant and Birdman. So Gravity, Birdman, Revenant, right in a row. And also he shot Ali, which Chris and I covered on scoring at the movies. Lisa Churgin, I guess that's how you say that name, was one of the editors, along with John Spence. She's been known to cut both drama and comedy. Does a pretty good job. This movie's pretty snappy. This is his only credit as an editor. He's been an editorial assistant on lots of other movies, or was back then, as an assistant and so on. And the arranger and orchestrator was Carl Wallinger, but this movie's best known, of course, when it comes to music, for the pop hits. And there are so many, and I probably didn't even mention 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other ones that are really good that people like. And I mentioned probably 8 of them already. So what do you think of the look and the editing, and the writing and the directing and the music in this film?
I think the technicals are not very ambitious at all. Credit to the editing. I think this is a nice taut film that doesn't overstay its welcome in any way, in any scene. Great cinematographer, but nothing about it blows me away or impresses me. I want to give credit to costume design because it does feel like they really nailed it. The hair, the clothes, everything about their style, what they wear to work. It felt perfect.
Before the wrap-up, I do want to say this thing about the love triangle, which I do think is a pretty good passion thing, so I can see why it's a passion nominee for the AFI list. I know we're supposed to root for Lainey and Troy, and in some ways I do. But Michael's the better guy. Maybe he wasn't right for her either. But Troy is a selfish disaster. He's emotional at the end because of his dad dying. And they moved in together, and maybe it's going to go well. But I don't know if I ever really related to him, even when I was 20 in 1994, or whenever I saw the film, probably a year or two later. And I sure don't now. You do have to be practical, and life is about compromise, which she doesn't want to do, but he really doesn't want to do. If you want your movie or your song, which he wrote, to be seen or heard by anybody, sometimes you have to let others change a little, or even a lot. If not, you better accept that your vision might only click with about 8 people. I think Winona is as sweet as ever, and Garofalo is pretty good, but Zahn is completely wasted. And while Hawke is convincing as a cool guy, even though he's usually thought of as earnest in this time frame, think of Dead Poet Society, I also find him insufferable. So I'm not enamored with this movie, and I think some of the dialogue is Juno-esque in that while some of it is biting,
comparison.
some of it's great. A lot of it felt dated even then.
Yeah. Yeah. You can enjoy that movie the first time, and then by the second time you're watching it, you're like, oh,
Home Skillet
no.
comes to mind from Juno.
Oh, God. Or all the OMG stuff. There's a lot of cringing in that movie, too.
If I'm 3 stars, it's quite generous, but it wasn't a bad movie, and I do love that music. Your last thoughts?
It's a great time capsule for what it was like in terms of fashion and music and general vibes, too. It really does nail the Gen X thing. I think it's also a really great illustration of the universal experience of becoming an adult. They're all still kids in so many ways, and the independence and freedom are incredible. They allow you to stretch and grow and really find yourself on your own terms, but the growing pains are real, too. And I believe that a recent grad would watch this film and still find plenty to connect with, even if they would be totally scandalized by all the smoking. It's not a perfect film.
Good point.
But it was perfect for me in 1994, and I think I said this to you when we were watching it. I would pay our nephew, who's in film school right now, to watch this movie and tell me what he thinks about it.
And by the way, I'm thinking right now that Ben Stiller, who was not young or old, I guess he was young, but he wasn't as young as some of the people, certainly not the characters. But Danny DeVito seems like a strange choice to produce this.
But he was really doing that at the time. I mean, like,
he wanted to find the edgy movies, I guess.
Yeah, and he was really into
like
being behind the scenes and getting movies made. He got some movies greenlit that were great.
You got to think he stayed out of the way then, let Stiller and Tarantino make these movies, because it doesn't seem like they're in his wheelhouse.
Part of the reason I think that it has such a low rating on Rotten Tomatoes is because it was a movie made completely by people in their 20s, and most critics were probably in their 50s or older. Yeah. And they just weren't going to get it. It's not a movie for them, so they're going to see all the flaws, of which there are plenty.
So that was how we saw Reality Bites. When we get back in your ears in 7 days, we'll be in the year 1984, so 10 years before this, and we'll talk about how people who weren't allowed to dance for so long can somehow be so remarkably great at it. As we review Footloose, the coming attractions opinion question for Footloose. When we do the review next week, we'll make fun of how so many people are incredible dancers in a town that banned the practice. But right now, let's just judge the actors who play these characters. Which one impresses you the most at the big school dance at the end of the film? The guy who does the robot? The burly guy who does that Russian dance thing? One of the 2 women who get to show off their stuff for a few seconds? Kevin Bacon himself? Or Christopher Penn?
Yes. So for the answer to that question, check out next week's podcast about Footloose. You already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, which is also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. While you're there, leave us a rating and a review. That's a great way to support the podcast. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. I'm also at Bev Ellis Ellis on Threads, by the way, and you can also reach us by email, haveyouveurseenpodcast@gmail.com, and you can find our podcast on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
I could go for a Snickers. Might skip the wrapper, though.
You're so hung up on the wrapper. And cut.